So hey everybody, good morning. My name is Robin Silvestri. I'm with the Executive Director at Save the Great South Bay. We are an environmental nonprofit that was formed back in 2013 when two Sable residents returned home and were just appalled at the state of the bay. It was murky, dark brown water, what had once been crystal clear, beautiful waters. And so they vowed that then and there that they would do whatever they could to help restore the bay and give the bay a voice. And that's what we've become. Our four key programs include the Creek Defender program. There are 50 creeks that lead into the bay. These creeks serve as arteries of fresh water to the bay, and we make sure they stay unblocked, free of debris. We go out once a year along most of those creeks and clean them up, remove anything that's blocking them from flowing freely. We also run the Great South Bay Oyster Project. We're putting our millionth oyster back in the bay this year. We have 6 community oyster gardens between Amityville, over at Fire Island, Bayshore, Babylon, Umpqua, yacht clubs, at Bright Waters, and this year we also added in the Snapper Inn. They have about 40,000 baby oysters over at Snapper Inn, so thanks to Rich Remmer for that. Yeah. Thank you. Our third program is water quality monitoring. It goes a little bit beyond our own borders to the greater South Shore Estuary Reserve, which stems from Hempstead to Shinnecock Bay. So we're working with partners, Operation Splash over in Freeport Creek, Friends of Belport Bay on Carmen's River. A Cornell Cooperative is monitoring for us on the Connecticut River. And Stony Brook SOMAS, the School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences, is monitoring for us out in Mauritius and Shinnecock Bay. And all of that science, which means really very little to me and when it's in its scientific form, will be translated into a letter grade report card so that everyday people can understand what 10 milligrams of, dissolved oxygen means in the water. Is it an A, or is it a C, or maybe even in some cases an F, depending on the tributary. Our first report card will be introduced in 2026, early 2026, and will take advantage of the historical data that Suffolk County Department of Health has been collecting for nearly 50 years. And the town of Hempstead, also 5 decades of data that we're going to actually analyze and interpret for people to understand the trends that have happened over time out in the bay. And finally, our fourth area that we work in is something that we're doing right today. It's advocacy and education. We advocate strongly for increased use of sewers and reduced use, so replacements or high replacements of outdated cesspools. Nitrogen from cesspools accounts for over 60% of the nitrogen problem in the bay. So with the passage of Prop 2 in November, we finally have the funding coming in order to allow people to replace their cesspools with more efficient models, and where possible, it's not possible in many places, but to connect to sewers. Not to spur development, but really to address the existing development that is already here that is leading issues to the bay. So with that, I just want to say thank you to our volunteers, Kathy Schmitz, who came out today to help us set up, and Walt Meschenberg was here to help us set up. Thanks, Kathy. Thanks to Ava and Lauren, our staff members who are here to make this event happen. And I'd like to call out board member Andy Merschel, who also serves as our West Islip Creek Defender, and Walt Meschenberg, who is our Mastic Beach Creek Defender. Oh, and I see Mary there in the back. Mary, raise your hand. Mary's helping us put together some great things for the upcoming Oyster Ball. If you haven't gotten your tickets yet for the Oyster Ball, they are selling out. We did sell out last year. We're in a little bit bigger venue this year. It's our annual gala. It's September 13th over at Gatsby on the Ocean. We'll have 6 oyster farmers shucking live oysters for us, a live auction. Tim Mooney from Fire Island Ferries, his band will be playing for our entertainment, and lots of fun. So with that, I'm very pleased to introduce our guest speaker for today. It's a little bit different format for us. But we're really proud to welcome Steve Kuhn, who's a local Sable resident who fell in love with clamming the moment a friend took him clamming on the bay on a crystal clear day, and hopefully it was a crystal clear bay, when Kuhn was an undergraduate at North Carolina State University. He went on to get his degree in environmental design and landscape architecture as a plan B in case clamming didn't work out. But we all know how clamming was back then. It was prolific, and yeah, many people made their livings out there on the bay. In 1971, Steve created the Clam Power brand. He was the OG merch guy, literally ahead of his time. And it became very popular among clammers and eventually gained a wider following on Long Island. Over time, however, Steve watched as an industry that once employed thousands of full-time clammers dwindle to a handful of hardy souls. And so still 9-to-5 landlubbers think life on the water means freedom and serenity, but there's a totally different side to being out on the water and being in the elements. He wants you to know that more than anything, clamming is a tough physical labor. So in 2020, I'm going to say during COVID, right? Steve published a story of his adventures. Hard work, my life as a clammer on the Great South Bay. And now, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but now, if you don't look it, 78, Kuhn still spends 2 to 3 days a week clamming on the Great South Bay. So today, Steve is going to talk about his adventures, and then following his talk, he's available to personally autograph and personalize copies of his book that are for sale, 20 bucks a book, 25 bucks a hat, and how much for a t-shirt? $25 for a t-shirt. They're available in limited quantities, so grab them while you can. So thank you very much for joining us, and enjoy the talk.
I'm not going to speak with a microphone. If you can't hear me, yell and I'll speak louder, okay? I'd like to start by saying how I wrote this book. It took me actually 10 years to write it. And I kept thinking of more and more things to put in. And finally, when COVID hit, I said, I better finish this thing before I forget what I want to say. So that's when I finished it. I had a friend in Rhode Island who'd self-published. I went up there and we did the final details and came out with the book. And after that, you weren't allowed to travel. So I was glad I was able to do it. One of the main reasons that I wrote this book, if you tell people now that you're a clammer, their eyes kind of light up. First thing they think of is, oh, you're out on the water. Well, when you go out in the water, you're having a good time. You're going fishing, you're going to Fire Island, you're out of your office, you're going here, you're going there. But there's another side to it, and that's what I wanted to highlight. When I went out clamming and I kind of fell in love with this job on the first beautiful day, you say to yourself, that's great. But there's days when it's not so beautiful. The bay is a really windy place. A lot of times the wind's blowing 20, 25 miles an hour. It could be pea soup fog. It could be 98 degrees and it could be 20 degrees. You're gonna have thunderstorms, lightning bolts coming down, snowstorms. We've been out in all that weather. So this is the part of the book that I kind of wanted to show that there's an other side to clamming. When I started, there were thousands of people clamming. You can count them almost on two hands right now for the amount of guys there. So I knew it was kind of fading, and I wanted to be able to have something written down to show what it was really like to be a clammer on the Great South Bay. So I'd like to start. I want to read this first chapter that I wrote, and this was took place about 2 or 3 years after I'd started clamming. This is entitled The Game. One Saturday afternoon in late October or early November, I was clamming on the bay off of East Iceland. I was working fairly close to shore in about 5 to 6 feet of water. The weather that day was cold, damp, and dreary. Dark gray clouds covered the sky, and 10 to 15 mile an hour northeast wind with light to intermittent rain was falling. Oftentimes it was like that at this time of the year. Onshore, there was a football game going on. Sound travels on the wind, and I could hear everything. The band was playing, the fans were cheering. I could hear the public address announcer describing the plays. When the touchdown was scored, there was a huge roar from the crowd. The band played the school's fight song. I felt as I was actually at the game, although I wasn't. I looked around, and as far as I could see, there wasn't another soul on the water. I thought to myself, this is pretty neat. There are hundreds of people on land into this football game, and no one even knows that I'm out here. They were doing their thing, and I was doing mine. I really did want to be exactly where I was, and I thought that this is really part of being a bayman, just doing your own thing. I said to myself that if I can be out here on a cold, wet, damp day at this time of the year, I must really like what I'm doing, and I did. I started this as the first chapter in the book because to me this was an important time in my life. When you're 19, 20 years old, you don't really know what you want to do with your life. And I was searching like everybody else. And I decided, you know what, this wouldn't be such a bad way to spend your life. I can think of a lot of other things that would be worse. So it was like kind of an aha moment. And one of the things I really liked about it was the solitude, that you could spend time kind of with yourself and concentrating and doing what you were doing. And I just said, this is great. So that's what I decided. I kind of want to do this. So now I'd like to cut to the time that the first time I ever went out clamming. I had a friend who started, I'm going to say maybe 2 years before I did. And at the time I was working at a landscape nursery. And he'd worked there earlier too. But he called me up one day and he said, you want to go out clamming? And back then there were thousands and thousands of people clamming. So I said, sure, because we were all talking about wanting to do that, but nobody ever did. So I still remember we sailed from Browns River in Sayville to Heckscher Park, which incidentally, I'm still clamming, and I'm clamming at Heckscher Park right now. And I hadn't been there in about 45 or 50 years. It's a long time. It's like Yogi Berra, deja vu all over again. So anyway, we sailed there, and it took about, I'm going to say, a half hour. We had a 40-horse motor, and he set up a rake and poles for me, and the same for him, and we went to work clamming. And I'd never done this before, so we clammed off the bow of his boat. And Heckscher Park was like a really good training ground. The bottom was soft, clean sand, and the only thing there were clams. So we went to work, and at the end of the day, I caught 2 bushels of clams, and that's what he caught, 2 bushels of clams. He said to me, you know, that for somebody who's never done that before, he said, that's really good. You did the same as I did. So that made me feel good. My hands were like chopped meat. I had blood blisters all over the place. And I was tired, and I think we worked maybe around 5 hours or so. But I said it was like a really good tired. I describe it as a good feeling. Well, we got $28 a bushel. No, excuse me, $14 a bushel for clams. So I made $28. Now, I know that's not a lot of money, but my take-home pay at the nursery was $89 for the week. So automatically in my mind, I go, if I work 5 days, I can make $140 a week. Wow, this is great. Of course, you don't get 5 beautiful days. You get maybe 1 or 2, and the rest of them, it doesn't work like that. But nobody, especially when you're young, you don't think like that. So I had another friend who worked at the nursery, and we decided that we were going to leave the nursery and go camping. So we had to get a boat. We found a boat in Bayshore. It was a 24-foot decked over garden, and I still remember it was a great big house, and in the back was a canal. It had a long driveway. We walked down the driveway, we saw the boat, and we said, we'll take it. We didn't have a motor for it. 3 days later, my friend found a 40-horse engine, and we had a motor. We paid $300 for the boat and $300 for the motor. So for $600, we had a boat and a motor, and we were going to go clamming. Well, the boat, if it didn't have a bilge pump in it, would have sunk. We called it the leak and leaner because there were so many things wrong. So we had to haul it out and fix it. And the guy in the boatyard was really nice, and he knew we were young and we didn't have any money. So he wouldn't ask for the money until we went clamming about 3 or 4 weeks later, and then we could pay it. Well, we didn't even have a dock space. So we walked down the end of the driveway, we put the motor on, and we drove it back to Sayville. Well, off of Sayville, there's a little marina by the Candy Avenue apartments, and there was some dock slips there, so we just stuck the boat in there. And it was there for about 2 weeks, and we came down and we found a note on it one day and said, if you don't move this, it's gonna get towed away. So we had to find another dock slips. So we sailed out and we went up Browns River, and we got by the Cherry Grove Ferry, and there was a guy standing on the dock, and his name was Tom, and I'd gone to high school with Tom, and his parents owned the Cherry Grove Ferry. So he goes, what are you guys doing? So I told him, we're looking for a dock space. So he said, well, let in here. So we pulled it in there and we tied it up. And that night we went out to a local bar and we were having a few drinks, and Tom was in there. And he goes, oh, I asked my dad, and he said, you can keep the boat there. So just like that, we had a dock space. Well, that dock space lasted 50 years. It was just like a stroke of good luck. They liked having us around because we were there in the winter when there was nobody around, and we could keep a little eye on the place. The Cherry Grove Ferry was sold to the Pines Ferry, and Tom and his family says, we grandfathered you in. I don't know if he was joking or not, but anyway, we kept our boat at the Pines Ferry. Still at the Cherry Grove Ferry, but at the Pines. And then what happened, we wound up moving by the freight yard, and I was there for a long time. And eventually they got a new ferry that was bigger, and it took my dock space. So now I just moved around to Weston's Boatyard, which is right around the corner. And that's where I've been for 55 years. So I would be forever grateful to the Picornis and the Steins for letting me keep my boat there and my friend's boat. Okay? So Bill and I, we went clamming, but we didn't work that hard. We was young, you know, in school. When I came home from college in the spring, we'd go out and we'd go clamming. If it was hot, we'd jump in the water and go swimming. If there were fish around, we'd cast the pole and we'd catch some fish. If it rained, we said, we're not going out. So that's kind of what we did for a while. I mean, we were having a ball. We were making a few dollars. We were enjoying ourselves. I still remember the first day we went out and it was cold. We didn't even have gloves, and our hands just about froze. So we said, oh God, we're going in. We can't do this. Well, back then, there were a lot of people clamming, right? One of my friends was a guy named Rocky, and everybody had a nickname. Well, Rocky's nickname was Rocky Raccoon because he was always singing the Beatles song, Rocky Raccoon. So he was either Raccoon or Rocky. And I should mention that Bill and I worked together on the same boat for about 2 or 3 years. But you could see, if you were on the boat by yourself, that you could do better clamming individually than with 2 people on the boat, because you want to cover as much bottom as you possibly can and as fast as you can. So when you got 2 rakes in there, you're going half the speed. So what happened is we split up. I took the boat and Bill took the motor, and he got another boat, and I got another motor. We still worked together, but we each had our own boats. So anyway, there was a lot of people clamming out back then. I mean, all over the place. I'm going to say thousands. Wherever you went, there were boats. So a lot of people, they wouldn't tell you anything, right? Because think about it. The more clams that they're going to tell you to help you catch is going to be less than what they're going to catch. But then you meet some people and they talk and they're friends and you know. So I asked this guy Rocky. He was a really good clammer, and I said, where do you go? I said, sometimes I don't see you for like a week or 2 at a time. So he said, well, I go all over the bay. He goes, it depends what the wind's doing, or what the conditions are, and the only place I never worked was Heckscher Park. That's all I knew. So he says to me, tomorrow I'm going to go to Bayport. Why don't you meet me there? So I was going out of Sable. It was a lot shorter going to Bayport than it was to Heckscher Park. So I met Rocky in Bayport, and he introduced me to two of his friends, Clyde and Bill. Now, these guys were so much better at clamming than I was. I said, wow, look at these guys. How did they do it? I mean, it's like, you know, they were clamming a lot longer than I was, and they knew a lot more. Well, Rocky, my friend, he just had a natural feel for the bay. You could see when he pulled on the rake, he was feeling everything, the way he moved it, and he would oftentimes have a lot of clams, and more than the other guys. But then after about 5 or 6 hours, he'd say, that's enough, I'm going home, and he'd be tired. Now, my friend Bill, he was like, if you want to call it, he was like a stubborn Dutchman. I mean, he came out at 7 in the morning or 6:30 and threw the rake in and worked for 8 hours and never even took a lunch break. And at the end of the day, he was pulling the rake just as hard as when he started. He was just like so steady the way he did it. And then my friend Clyde, he was probably the best one of the three guys. He was strong as an ox. He pulled on the rake really hard. When he lifted it out of the water, it flew out of the water, and he could throw the clams up like you wouldn't believe. And then there was me, and I'm looking at these guys, and I go, oh my God, how did they do this? Well, I could see the first thing that they did, they worked a lot harder than me. So I said, well, that probably's got something to do with it. So what happened is I decided that if I'm going to do this and take it seriously, I was going to put the pedal to the metal and put my head down and go to work. So I didn't go swimming anymore if it was hot. If it rained, I went to work, and I just started to work. And it's amazing kind of what you can get out of yourself when you put your head down. But the thing is, all this stuff takes time. And we would talk about the length of the teeth on the rake, how long the pole was, how the basket was set up, and you kindly gradually get better and better and better. And it took a while, and I got to be as good as my friends, or in some cases even better. But it was such a great learning experience. So we just got to be really, really good at this. And when we go to places, people would see us and they go, oh no, here they come, right? We worked in all different types of bottom. In the springtime, we went over to Fire Island because the wind blew out of the south a lot, and you were close to shore and you were somewhat protected. About the third week in April, the clams would come up over there in shallow water, and you could really catch a lot of clams. And then towards the end of June, they would go down as the water heated up, and then we'd move out to the deeper water in the shells, and we'd work out there for the summer. And in the fall, we worked all over, on the beach, in the deep water. And finally in the winter, we stayed closer to this side of the bay because the winds blew out of the north a lot, and we always went out with a couple of us in case something happened. I mean, we go work in ice like this thick. You know, we'd work all the time. That's why I named this book Hard Work, because I knew that's what it was. It was hard work. Once you decide that that's what you're going to do, it was really hard work. And other people said, oh, you shouldn't, but I said, that's what it's going to be, and that's what I named it. Okay? I'd like to read something else I wrote in the book. Let me see what page it's. The title of this book and chapter is Hard Work, and I would like to explain why. Clamming to me wasn't just a job, it was a lifestyle. And as I put my time in and learned, and I started to get better, I could see that I was improving. I was starting to catch up to my friends. Played sports in high school, wasn't afraid of competition. In fact, I welcomed it. If someone was better than me at something, I wanted to be just as good or better than them. My friends were good because they knew where to clam, how to clam, and when to clam. Because they worked really hard, I decided if I was going to be as good or better than they were, I was going to have to pick it up and start working harder, and so I did. It's amazing what you can get out of yourself when you set your goals high and you put your mind to it. I decided to work as hard as I could do and do my very best each and every day. I took one day at a time, and when I thought I had worked as hard as I could possibly work, I would try to squeeze even more out of myself and work even harder. An average day consisted of working 7.5 to 8 hours. Lunch was 15 minutes. That was it. At the end of each drift, you would eat and drink something. And after all, an engine needs fuel. Then you would move back up to your buoy and do it again. This is what you did for the day. It was like exercising and working out and doing aerobics for 7 to 8 hours every day. And for the week, I would try to work 5.5 days, especially from spring to fall. Some weeks you just couldn't do it because the weather was so bad. Most of the time, the wind kept us home. If it blew 25 miles or more, it was usually kind of futile. Besides, we worked ourselves to exhaustion, and we welcomed a day off now and then. To say the least, you got in good, no, great shape. There was no more lounging, fishing, swimming, or just going through the motions. This was work, hard work, and I loved it. It's what I wanted to do. That's why I named this book Hard Work. So my point is, you learn this stuff over time, and you just gradually get better and better at it. And we would go all over the bay. I've been 55, 57 years, and some of my friends are gone, and most of the guys on the bay are gone. But I still really, really like to be out there in the fresh air and the exercise, so I'm gonna just try to keep going as long as I possibly can. Okay? Let me see. I've been out in just about every type of weather you can imagine. I mean, thunderstorms with lightning bolts coming down. One day I was out there and a thunderstorm hit, and I had my nephew picking clams. And the thing to do would be, when you saw the storm coming, you should get out of there, but we never did that. We always had to finish up the bushel of clams, right? So by the time we got out of there, the lightning bolts were coming down, the wind was blowing 30 miles an hour, and I had a 200 horse Mercury, and we pinned it. The spray was like a fire hose on the wind. You couldn't see anything. And we got into the river, and I looked at my nephew, and his face was about as white as his shirt. He was so relieved that we got in. And we never did tell his mother. But stuff like that happens. So you're out, you know, these storms can come out of nowhere. And you can work in pea soup fog. And I've worked in snowstorms and blizzards. And when it's flat calm and 98 degrees. And some of the worst things is when it's flat and 95 degrees and the no-see-ums and the gnats or the black flies come out and you can't get rid of them and they're biting you like crazy. Just the other day, last week, with a north wind off of Heckscher Park, the flies come out from the beach, and I must have had 50 or 60 flies in them. I think I donated a pint of blood to these. You just can't get rid of them. You got all these different conditions, and then you get some beautiful, beautiful days. My brother-in-law Kevin, I took his daughter out last year, and she picked probably the nicest day all year. There were like light winds from the north at about 5 miles an hour, and the air was fresh, and she had a smile on her face from when she got on the boat to when she got in, and she goes, "Maybe I should give up teaching." I said, No. So, but what I'm saying is you reach just all kinds of conditions, okay? So one day in 1986, I was heading east, and it was about a week before Christmas. And for December, it was an absolutely beautiful day. It was flat calm, and the temperature was above freezing. And where I'd learned to clam on the reef with Bill and Clyde and Rocky, that area was closed for about 6 years due to pollution. Well, there were a couple boats over there, and I'm gonna say 5 or 6 or 7 boats. So I sailed over, and I forget a lot of things, but I still remember this. There was a friend of mine there, Red, and I go, is this place open? And his exact words, that's what they say. Well, I said, wow, it really is so. It was supposed to be based on rainfall, and I swore it rained, but I guess it didn't rain enough. So anyway, I set up, and I knew exactly where the clams were, because this is where I learned to work, right? Well, on the east side, where the bottom drops off, it goes from 6 to 10 feet of water, and it goes from sand to hard bottom to mud. And it's a slope like that, and the clams were on that slope, and there were a lot of clams there. So I had a depth recorder, and I set it up, and when it reached 10 feet, I threw the rake in and dragged it up. I should say that the 10 boats became 50 boats, the 50 became 150, and the 150 became 500 or 600, 700 boats. Everybody that was clamming kind of knew that this place was open. I mean, it was like, if you picked up your pole, you hit the boat behind you. Well, most of the guys set out a little further out on the reef where it was a little shallower and it was a little more level. It wasn't so hard to work. I went right on that edge, and that's where I started to work. And you can make a fast grab and catch like 40, 50, 60, 70 clams a grab and do it really quick. So I would throw it in at the 10 feet and drag it up to the 6 feet, make 2 or 3 grabs, and when it got to 6 feet, move back to the 10 feet. And I could do that because it was flat calm, and I could sit right on top of these things. So after a while, other guys saw what I was doing, and they came there too. And this thing ran, I'm gonna say maybe 1/8 of a mile, almost all the way into shore. So we worked there, and to make a long story short, I wound up catching 15 and a half bushels of clams. And that was the best day I'd ever had in my life. And I'll never forget that day. It was right before Christmas when they wanted the clams, you know, and it was really enjoyable. Well, this was before cell phones and everything. So when I got home, my wife says, you're late. Well, I said, well, guess what I caught? So she said, I don't know, what'd you catch? 4 bushels of clams? I said, no, more than that. I don't know, 5 or 6? No, I caught more than that. 8? More than that. What did you catch? I don't know. So I told her, and she said, well, why didn't you stay out longer? That's true, too. So, anyway, we paid some bills. We bought 2 tickets to Barbados, and in January we took a vacation. It was absolutely the best day that I ever had in my life clamming. I caught more clams in Staten Island, but to me that was the best day ever because it was done here in the Great South Bay. So by working and doing and learning, and that was, incidentally, that was more clams than anybody in this whole thing caught, because you clam by intelligence. You know what's going on. A couple of guys caught 12 bushels of clams, but you had to do it quick. You had to learn. I should also mention that I had a friend next to me, and his brother was on the boat, and his brother had skipped school, but he wasn't doing so good. So what happened, I borrowed his brother to count my clams, because I had like 5 or 6 bushels of clams right away, but I didn't have them counted. So he counted them, and I paid him $5 a bushel. So he was ecstatic. He was a kid, and I gave him $80 at the end of the day, and he was so happy. And I still remember that too, but he skipped school to do that. It was funny. What happens is, like I said, we worked all over the bay. We got to be really good. We went here, we went there, we went everywhere. About 1998, the bay was kind of going down. A lot of the clams were caught. People were dropping out. I decided to go into Staten Island. Well, Staten Island is kind of a crazy place. The state ran a program where they took clams out of Raritan Bay, put them on a trucked them out to Peconic, and put them on a raft. And they would have to stay on the raft for 3 weeks, and then they were allowed to be sold. They purged themselves and cleaned themselves out. So you go into Staten Island, we'd get up at 3:30 in the morning, take the Southern State to the Belt Parkway, over the Verrazano Bridge, Highland Boulevard, and we docked in a place called Lemon Creek, and we were allowed to leave at dawn. Staten Island was totally different than the Great South Bay. The water was a lot deeper, 20, 25 feet in a lot of places. There was a channel in there that for tankers that ran like 60 to 80 feet deep. The first day I ever clammed in there, I set the rake up, and it's, you know, the pole's like 40, 45 feet long. In the Great South Bay, the longest is like 25 feet, 26 feet. And when I threw it in, I didn't even realize that I drifted into the tanker channel. If I hadn't been holding the rake, it would have went all the way to the bottom, and I would have lost it because it never hit the bottom. I threw it in, it just held it, and it went straight down. So you learn. One day we were heading in there, and they had a detour on the Belt Parkway, and we got lost. And we didn't know where we were. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning. There's people all over the place, and we're saying, where are we? So we stopped in this deli, and I said to the guy, where are we? And he goes, you don't know where you are? I go, no. He goes, you're in Brooklyn, USA. I go, thank you. Thank you very much for that information. I go, where's the Verrazano Bridge? So we went around and we got to work. So when you're in Staten Island, you have a deckhand, and he's called a roper. And the reason for that is the bottom is 20 feet deep, and you need help pulling the rake up. So there's a rope attached to the rake, and his job is to pull the rope, and you kind of guide the pole. You empty it out into a basket. He empties the basket into a color rack, picks the clams out, sorts them, and throws the shells away. So to say, it was like, I'm going to say, a cast of characters that these guys were, right? I mean, they were, a lot of them were like really rough around the edges. So the first guy I had was a Spanish guy, and his name was Javier. And he wound up being a great roper. He was a family man, and when I would get a guy, I'd say, listen, you have to be here every day. You can't make excuses why you couldn't come for this. I don't care if you had a hangnail or your grandmother died. I said, you got to come here, right? So he came every day, and he worked for me for 2 years, right? And he couldn't do it the 3rd year. He got another job. So he goes, don't worry, I'll get you another guy. And my friend Doug, who was in there with me, he needed a guy too. So Javier got us 2 ropers. So I still remember he comes, and they're walking up the driveway, these 3 guys. Well, the one guy was about 5'10" and about 180 pounds. He was strong and stocky. And the other guy was about 6 foot and about 120 pounds. So my wife says, well, which one are you going to? I said, I don't know. Well, I got the 6 foot and 120 pound guy, right? And his name was Christian. And Javier said, here are the Tigers. So everybody had a nickname, so from then on, his name was Tiger. And actually, Tiger turned out to be a good roper too. But there was a couple funny things that happened. I told him I wanted 550 clams in a bushel. And the first day seemed a little slow. And when you go in the next day, you get a sheet of how your clams counted out. Well, it turned out there was 680 clams in the bushel. So I said, no, I want 550. We do it the next day, and there's 670 clams in the bushel. So I called up Javier. I said, you told me he's smart. I said, he can't count. So Javier says, don't worry. He goes, I straighten him out. He goes, if he doesn't do this right, I'm going to have him count bushels of rocks for a week. So needless to say, after that, the count was right. So Tiger worked for me for about 1.5 years, 2 years maybe. A year, I'm just saying, no, about a year, maybe a year, right? And he used to call me Father. He goes, Father, Father. He was a young guy, right? And there was an ice cream truck, and he'd go, gelato, gelato. So I'd buy him an ice cream cone. And he turned out to be a really good guy. He called me up one day. He says, I'm getting another job. Can I put you down for a reference? I go, yeah, sure. I go, where you working? He goes, to GOP. I go, what's the GOP? Well, the GOP was the gap. So that's where he moved on. I don't know if he ever got the job, but I put him down as a reference as a hardworking guy. And then I had another roper, this guy Manny, and he worked for me, I'm gonna say a year, and one of the guys had a great line. Manny was always on the phone with his girlfriend, arguing, right? And the guy's working next to me, he goes, do you have a roper or a secretary? Right? I thought that was pretty funny. So anyway, he worked, and the last roper I had was this guy Kenny, and this is the craziest thing that happened to me. Kenny was a black guy, and he worked part-time in Macy's. He lived in the South Bronx, and he'd come to work every day. He was real quiet. He never said too much, but he was a nice guy. They'd take the train and to Staten Island and come to work, right? So one day we come into the dock, and the way it works is a truck and there's a finger dock, and there was a boat on the other side of the finger dock, and they were unloading their clams. So when I come in, my roper Kenny is supposed to help their roper put the clams on the conveyor belt up the truck, and then they're supposed to help us, and then they go, right? Well, Kenny went over to help them. Well, they didn't want any help because they had most of the clams put up, and they sailed away. So I'm on the other side there, and the guy running the truck, this guy Pete, he kind of ran it like a stormtrooper. And he says to me, don't worry, Steve, I'll handle it. And I'm going, handle what? I don't even know what's going on, right? So what happened is, we unloaded our clams and we went to sail around the back where we docked our boat. And as we sailed around, Pete went up to these guys who sailed away and read them the riot act. He said, if that ever happens again, you're gonna be kicked out of the program. He goes, you can't do that. And he's screaming, and he didn't say it too politely. You know, it was not a, you can imagine. So anyway, right, we dock our boat, and here comes the roper from the other guy's boat. Now these guys were big guys. This guy had his head shaved. He was full of tattoos. And you know, he looked like he was part of the Aryan nation. And he's walking towards, like this, with his fist, real fast towards my guy, Kenny. So I could see what's gonna happen. He's gonna go over there and you know, deck him or something like that. So Kenny was standing there, and I jumped up on the bow of the boat, and I said, hey, like that. And he stopped, and he goes, you guys ratted. He thought we complained that they didn't help us. Well, we never did anything like that. Not at all. I said, we didn't, you know, and he's straight. Well, with that, his boss comes. And his boss was bigger than he was. Well, he got out of jail, his boss, not too long ago, right? So I knew him from Clammer, and I helped him out with a few things. You know, he was like maybe in his late 20s. I helped him out, and basically what happened, I said, we didn't do this, but we didn't say it like that. It was all screaming and yelling. So he actually apologized, and we went on our way. We went home, right? So the next day, we come to work, and Kenny's there, and I go, Kenny, you all right with what happened yesterday? He goes, yeah, I'm fine. Well, I said, well, what would have happened, you know, if he came at you? He said, I would have got my .38. Oh, .38. Well, guess what? A .38. It's a loaded .38 that Kenny had in his little black bag that he was standing right next to. And he never said a word the whole time. He goes, I would have shot him. I go, oh my God. I'm glad you, I said, I'm glad you didn't do that. I said, now I know why when you walk through the South Bronx at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're not afraid of anybody. So the moral of the story is, watch out for the quiet guys. Oh my God, that actually happened. That was true. And I believe he would have too. He worked for me, and then kind of what happened, we saw 9/11 happen in there. And the wind was out of the east that day. And I'm looking at the World Trade Center, it's on fire. The smoke's coming up, and it kind of doesn't dawn on you because you don't expect a building like that to be smoking and being on fire. And there was a guy in front of me that was clamming, and he was a fireman. I said, what happened? He said, oh, a plane hit it. Well, I knew exactly what happened. I said, you know, that's terrorism. And with that, the other one went on fire. And then the fighter jets were flying overhead. And I'm going, oh my God, what's going on? Are we under siege here? And we were getting all these different vibes and what was happening. And it was a totally senseless tragedy. Well, they shut down all of the bridge, so we couldn't even get off of Staten Island. We all went into the dock. And they opened up the bridge at 6 o'clock that night. And it was the fastest I ever made it home in my life. There was no one on the road. And they shut down the program, I think, for a couple weeks, and then it opened up again. And it was a terrible, senseless tragedy that happened, but we saw it happen live. And then the following year, towards the end of the program, the clams had a virus in them. Not harmful to humans, but what it would do is it would take a clam that was alive and it looked exactly like a live clam. It would be jet black, but the whole inside of the clam was mud. So they couldn't sell the clams because in the restaurant, when the chef makes his pasta sauce and throws a clam in there and it turns black, they're not too happy. So they shut the program down for that, and I came back to the Great South Bay. So I worked in Staten Island for five years or so. That was that. I enjoyed Staten Island, but the nice part was some days I caught 20, 22, 23 bushels of clams. The boat almost sunk. But the rigmarole of going back and forth and driving, and it just kind of wears you out. So the clamming part was the good part, but if you didn't get out of there by 1 o'clock, coming home on the Bell Parkway, forget about it. It took you forever. So that was Staten Island. I came back to the Great South Bay, and I had a few interesting stories. I just like a couple of things I wrote in this book. One I titled "The Luckiest Clam," and I've actually never spoken about this, so this is the first time. One day over at Davis Park, I caught a moon snail. Now I don't know if you know what a moon snail is. It's a snail about this big, and they're a predator. Well, the body that comes out of the moon snail is about like that. They're really big. Well, I caught this moon snail, and the tooth of the rake went right through the outside body of the moon snail. And when I pulled the rake up, the moon snail wasn't in the basket. It was on the outside of the rake. And I took it off. Well, the moon snail had a clam. That's what they do. And he had his tongue inside the clam. So I pulled the moon snail and the clam off the rake. And you had to yank with all your strength to rip this clam out of the moon snail, right? So I put the clam off to the side. And at the end of the day, when I counted my clams, I had one extra one, that clam. So I threw them back. And I'm thinking to myself, you have a lot of time to think out there by yourself. So you come up with these ideas. You go, well, what are the odds? 99 times out of 100, this clam would have been dead. If I didn't catch the moon snail, he would have been eaten. And if I didn't have an extra clam, he would have been in a pot of chowder or eaten on the half shell. But as circumstances happened, he was allowed to live. You know, man, I said, I hope he grows into a great big chowder. You know, crazy things like that. So I wrote about that. And then there was another time on my boat. Everybody had a pet seagull out there. And the seagull I had, we nicknamed him Holy because he had a hole in his foot. That's how I knew it was the same one. And he would sit on the bow of your boat, and he looked like a pet. He was, you know, he'd plop down, and I'd throw him crabs and stuff. But if another bird came, he would attack it and just about kill it. You know, they do anything for food. So he would annihilate a crab in about 5 minutes. You know, the only thing left would be a shell. Well, one day I threw this blue claw in that I had. Well, he got too close to it. And what happened, the crab bit him on the foot, right? So he starts squawking. And this bird flies up in the air about 100 feet, and if you can picture this, he's dangling his foot, and his crab won't let go. And he's going like this, doing all these loops and dives and everything, and the crab, it wouldn't let go. Finally, I guess he gave up and he landed in the water, and as soon as he landed in the water, the crab let go and swam away. I thought that was one of the funniest things that I'd ever seen. You know, I wish I had a video of it, this bird flying around trying to get rid of this crab. I've fallen in maybe 3 or 4 times. Once on the dock, slipping on the ice. Another time, right off of here in the east side, I had a friend, we had a boat docked and we were eating lunch, and he came over, and the bow of his boat was going to slam into mine, so I went to push it off, and it was real choppy, and I fell in, and I'm going through the air, and I'm going, don't go under the water. And when I went under the water, I said, you better get out of the water. He said I shot up like a Polaris missile. I was young then, I could do that. And I got back on the boat, and I got in the cabin, and I don't know, I looked, and there's blood all over the place. I go, what happened, right? Well, I had a tong rack on the top of my boat, and I went to grab it, and my finger nicked the end of it and cut the tip of my finger. But you know, your adrenaline, I didn't even know it. I wrapped it in some bandages and some Scott towels and stuff, and I went home and took a hot shower and went back to work. Another time, my friend fell in off of East Islip Marina, and this guy Greg, that's who I sold the clams to, and he was a big guy, like 6'4" and about 250. He's poling his boat, and he goes, I know I'm gonna fall in, and he did. He just fell in, and we said, oh my God, we fished him out, and it was below freezing. He talked to us for 15 minutes. There were icicles hanging off as he goes, well, I guess I should go home and take a shower. And he did, you know. So stuff like that happened. I saved a couple people's lives that fell through the ice. We cut holes in the ice, and what happens overnight, the ice will skim over. And if you're not paying attention, it looks like regular ice. So we were out in Bayport one time, and this guy, he's an older guy, he went right in the drink, and my friend and I, we fished him out, and it was really cold, and he got out, and he lost a boot, and he ran all the way in the shore, and I don't know if some of you people remember Gunsmoke with Chester. Well, he hobbled all the way in the shore with one boot on and one boot off. I righted sailboats, catamarans that flipped over. People just being in the right place. I had another guy in a rowboat who was rowing along the shore, and it was blowing like 5 or 6 miles an hour, which went to 15 to 20. And the next thing I know, he's drifting out by me, screaming and yelling because he had no power. But he would have been to the other side of Fire Island. The waves would have been like this. So I towed him in. So he was so grateful and appreciative too. Things like that. Just being out there and happen to be in the right place at the right time and helping people out. I just wanted to talk a couple more things. I started Clam Power. I did that in about 1970, 71. And I was in design school, and we just learned how to silkscreen. I did a couple designs and picked out the one I liked the best. I was sitting at my desk one day, and I was reading a comic strip, and there was a talking clam in there. And this arose out of the early 70s, where there was like black power and white power and flower power and power for the people. And we were young, rebellious students, and I'm sitting there, why not Clam Power? To me, those things were kind of somewhat serious. I wanted to do something kind of on the lighter side, and that's what happened. And I came home, and I got some silk screening stuff, and my wife and I, we silk screened, and we put them all around our living room, and I brought them out on the bay to my friends, and they thought this was great. Well, Clam Power kind of took off, but what happened is people copied my silk screen. So kind of as it faded over the years, we brought it back. I'm going to say 13 or 14 years ago, there was a movie, Diggers, that was playing, and we set up in the lobby of the Sayville movie theater. And people went and watched the movie. They came down, and we got swarmed. And I still remember there was a young lady there, and she says, "Oh my God," she says, "when I was 13, this was my favorite shirt in the whole world. I'm so glad." And so I said, "Oh wow, this is great." So we send these things out all over the place. So we meet a lot of really nice people with similar interests. Some of the stories, I had a guy come up to me at the seafood festival, and he goes, and we hear this invariably, when I was clamming, that was the best days of my life. He goes, you know, when you think about it, well, everybody, they were young and free, and then carefree, and didn't have too much responsibility, and people were enjoying themselves. He goes, and I had no stress. He goes, "You know what I do now?" I go, "What?" He goes, "I'm on a SWAT team in New York City." He goes, "I go to work and I don't know if I'm gonna come home dead or alive." He goes, "When I get I got 2 more years, and when I get through with that, I'm going out in the Bay clamming again." So, stuff like that. I had a young lady come and she got a shirt and she started crying. I said, "What's the matter?" She goes, "Oh, this reminds me of my grandpa. He used to wear this all the time and I miss him." I, put my arm around it and said, "I know where you're coming from." I said, "Just hang in there." So she appreciated it. And then I got this email from this guy, and I just want to read this. I thought this is kind of all about what I had set up originally to kind of do. He goes, "Hey Steve, I received the shirt I ordered, and thanks for the prompt service. I put it on and sat at my table, and it took me back in time like no other. I remember I bought the shirt from Casino Clams on Main Street in Patchogue from a buyer named John. I don't remember his last name, but I remember he had a big head of red hair. He was a big man, and he could see I was scared, and he told me that if I needed anything, have any questions, come here, don't get hurt, and don't take any chances." And that's when I grabbed the shirt and I bought it. I ran a 32-foot blue and white tongboat out of Swan Creek. Kept the boat in Morgan Boat Yard, September 15th, 1980. It was my last day on the bay. I had my mom with me. I remember I had a count and a half, 2 weak fish, a bunch of crabs, and when I shut the radio off, Christopher Cross's Sailing had just ended. Little that I know, it would be the best job I ever had. Steve, I can't believe the impact this has had on me. The 16th of September in 1980, I went to school in Denver and never came back to New York. I raised 4 kids, just retired from UPS, but some of my best memories are on the bay. Thanks for bringing me back. I can't believe how this shirt has brought back memories from the basement of time. Thanks again, Tony. So, to me, that kind of summed up like kind of what we wanted to do. So that's kind of the story that's happened to me over the last 55 or 60 years that I've spent my life on the bay. So usually we show a video at the end, but we can't do that now. So I will say that's it, and I hope you enjoyed what I had to say.
Gosh, I'm so emotional. That was so, thank you for coming and speaking about your life story. It's so inspiring, and I mean, even just hearing stories that I personally never heard, like, I just love every second of it. So thank you so much, and give him another round of applause.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And like,
go ahead. I'm sorry. I usually open it up for questions.
Oh yeah. And then when we do book signing too, if you guys want. And we just want to thank Blessings Hospitality again for having us here. So thank you.
Yeah, I can open this up for questions if you'd like to ask me anything. Yeah.
When you went to Staten Island, what boat were you using?
I used my Garvey, but I had to change it around. I had to put a deck in it that was a lot higher than the Great South Bay, because with all those clams, the boat sat a lot lower. And you had to keep the scuppers up higher out of the water too.
Did you think after the World Trade Center when you were looking at that that, make up just go home by boat?
No, I wouldn't have made it home by boat. We trailed the boat back and forth and had, oh my God. You know, like I said, I was in there for 5 years, and every season when the last day, you know, you was glad to get out of there, you know. You kind of get back to a little normalcy. Oh,
Yeah, well, you know, what's the difference between using the rake and the tongs? You know, some people use
yeah, there
the
used to
rakes
be a
around
lot.
here, and my friend in West Islip used tongs using them.
Yeah, I'm going to say I always equated it with, like, if you're using a rake, it's kind of like using a power saw, whereas you're using tongs, it's kind of like a hand saw. And in other words, you're tying like this, so
Right.
you're picking them up. And when there were a lot of clams, those guys did really good. And the rake is like going through the bottom. So the idea with a rake, when you learn this, you got to find out what depth the clams are at and pull as short as teeth as possible and go through the bottom as fast as you can. With the control over it. If you go too fast, the rake will pop out, or you get a shell in it, you won't
Right.
catch anything. And the angle of the pole is very significant too. You know, too much or too short won't work. It has to be set at the right angle. So you have to kind of pay attention to a lot of details. You don't just kind of float around out there, because everything changes. You know, the tide goes up, it goes down.
Yeah, you're using the wind, right?
Yeah, the wind goes from one way, it goes to another way, it changes. It's a dynamic environment.
And with the tongs, you know, you gotta hold yourself in one place.
Yeah, well, yeah, like I said, when they had a lot of clams, their advantage is they could just sit right on top of them. But when the clams thinned out, you know, we could cover a lot more body line. You know, you could have clams like where you guys are and nothing over here. And when the wind's blowing 15 miles an hour and the tide's going one way and the boat wakes are pushing you the other way, it's not so easy to put yourself right on that spot every time.
Right.
You know, when the clams are thick and there's a lot of them, yeah, that's easy, but that doesn't happen anymore. Oh,
Is the clam population returning now, or what's the state of it?
well, I got a lot of, probably 200 waypoints, and I'd say 185 of them don't have a lot of clams. But what happened is the brown tide was kind of devastating, and we had bad brown tides quite a while, but the last 3 or 4 years, they haven't been too bad. And what that did, the small clams like that, they wouldn't survive. There's, I'm gonna say about 10 years ago, we had a set of clams like you wouldn't believe in the thing. Every shell you picked up had 8, 10, a dozen, little tiny clams, but we had like a 5-month brown tide, and by the end, everything had died. Now, where I'm clamming now, there's some clams that are that big. There's some clams that are that big. So it looks like it's turning the page a little, like it's a little healthier. And I'm not 100% sure, but I think we have a little bit of a brown tide now, and I hope it doesn't last too long. You know, so you never know. I try to be optimistic. You know. And what's the brown tide? It's an algae bloom.
I recently heard a talk from Senator the Christian of Bayport, who talked about the importance of relationships and that he only buys local because he knows where the local guys go. I imagine that's the same for you, relationships for business. How, which I'm sure you've had for decades now, you primarily sell, I imagine, to commercial, like restaurants and things? And
Well, I sell to a wholesaler, and he sells them to a restaurant. I used to sell to a restaurant, but you know what? That job is so grueling. By the time you get in, I don't want to be running around to this place or that place. I have some couple of my friends that they'll only get clams from me because they don't trust anybody else, things like that.
how has the price fluctuated over the years? Or has it,
Yeah, you know what? It's crazy. This year, the price of clams, the wholesale price isn't that high. Actually, I got more money sometimes 15 years ago for the clams than you do now, which is crazy. Everything costs like 3 or 4 times as much, you know. It goes up and down, you know. So, you're welcome.
When you went to Staten Island, were there any territorial issues with guys up there, or it was, you just?
Well, I was in a crew of 10 guys, and there was 7 crews. So we had to work kind of with our crew together, but it's clam digging. There's always somebody's mad at somebody. I saw some guys chasing guys, these guys running around in boats, and the guys throwing chowder clams at the guy, and they're zigzagging and they're screaming and yelling. Somebody's, it kind of comes with the turf, Somebody's always got something to say.
Now that they've stopped the dredging out of West Sayville, have you
Yeah.
seen any changes in the public? You walking that area now? Or?
Well, it's not open. As a matter of fact, it's funny. We're at the View I do clam sampling for the Nature Conservancy, the 2 sites. And one of them's right out here, right past that buoy. And the other one was over by the Fire Island Pines. And I have to catch 20 clams out of each site. Well, this one here, this area has been closed for a long time, and the bottom is alive. There's clams in it. The one by the pines is kind of like the Sahara Desert. Blue Point's what they did. They kind of dredged everything out, and when they couldn't catch any more clams, then they gave it to the Nature Conservancy. What they've done is have a whole bunch of different sites where they put bushels, hundreds of bushels of clams down with the idea that those clams will spawn and spread. And that could happen. And like I said, that one year when we had all those sea clams, it would have, if we didn't have that brown tide, this bay might have been paved with clams again. But we had it. So if the water quality improves and those clams spawn, you might get a lot of clams again. And it could be, all different clams. Right now, they have a lot of clams in Babylon. And a couple of years ago, they had hardly any clams there. So you never know. Oh. Yep.
Steve, I know there's a fascination with the hardiness of the baymen here. It's something we're proud of. To my recollection, the winter of 77, 78, I lived on Quarry Creek in Blue Point. That was a pretty rough winter. From your recollection, was there any winter tougher than that one?
No. In this book, we have a lot of pictures of clamming on the ice. And we worked in Babel. And there was 27 inches of ice on the water that year. And we were cutting holes in the ice. And the big thing to get was a Homelite chainsaw, because they didn't crap out when they got wet. So you had to get one with a big blade. And we cut holes in the ice, and we'd go clamming. And it was like Swiss cheese down there. There was so many holes. There's a story in here. We saw a brand new Dodge pickup truck fall through the ice, right off of Babylon Pool. It was the color of your shirt. It was blue. And they were driving along, and they hit a soft spot, and the front tires went down. And these 2 guys jumped out. And when they jumped out, the doors went on the hard ice. So it kept the truck up. And it took about 10 minutes. And it just went beep, beep, beep. And when it sunk, all you could see the top of the cab under like 3 feet of water and bubbles coming up. And that was true. There were about 30 guys standing around, and we go, what's he going to tell his insurance agent? We're going to have to take rent. I heard they got the truck out, but they wouldn't have been able to get it out till the bay thawed out. But that was some winter. As a matter of fact, yeah, my friend and I, this is another story in this book. We went to, it was either Bayshore or Babylon, and there was a lot of, like you said, tongers back then. Well, if a hole was cut, a tonger could only was in the hole, in the immediate hole. Us with our clam rakes, we could throw the ice the rake under the ice and grab what was around the edge of the hole. So my friend Clyde and I, we went there, and we worked 3 days, and we made $600, and we never cut a hole. And we wound up going to the Bahamas on that $600 for like, I'm going to say 7 to 8 weeks. There's a story in there about that. I had an old 59 Dodge. It was gray, had big fins, and the paint was peeling off, and we called it a screaming elephant. And we scratched that and wrote that on the side. We had to take a case of oil with us because it burned oil about every 100 miles. We had to put a quart of oil in. We drove to Florida. We stayed at my parents' house. We hitchhiked to Miami. Got to Miami at night, jumped a fence that was surrounding a sump, put up our sleeping bags, went to sleep. Didn't find out till a while later that's a good place for rattlesnakes to hang out. Thank God we didn't get any of them. We jumped the fence and hitchhiked to Miami airport, and got to the airport, and about a half hour or 40 minutes later, there was a flight leaving to the Bahamas. We got on that plane, and I still remember we walked down that gangplank from the plane, and it was so warm, it was beautiful. We stayed there for close to 2 months, and I had a friend who I went to college with, but we couldn't stay with him, so we stayed in this guy's yard, and he had a bunch of old cars and boats there, and he took the seats out, and he put mattresses in there, and he rented them out for $3 a night. We were young, and it didn't bother us at all, and after we were there for a week, he says, "You guys are pretty good, you're gonna be here for a while." He goes, "I'm not gonna charge you anything. Just go get people to stay here." So that's what we did. There was so many, college kids and people in the service that were vacation, and we got those to stay. And we met girls and stuff. They took us out to dinner and stuff. We like I said, we had $600, and we came home with $200 in our pocket. I laughed because I said, "Nah, that would get you about a half a night." The way things are. But you're right. This winter of '77 was a really, really tough winter. So, yeah, Jenny.
Comment on that winter. That was the winter Mr. Amaranda drove his Blazer from here across the Great River.
Okay.
Across the river.
Yeah, a lot of people went out on the ice in that. Yeah.
That was a wild winter.
Yeah.
Do you know the last time, 2 questions, the last time we seeded the bed?
No, I couldn't tell you that.
Just curious about that, because I haven't heard that.
That I know. They don't really seed the bay. They put clams down, like I said, with the idea that'll spawn. Yeah.
Just curious if they were doing that anymore. And then, were you still in Staten Island in 1993? Were you still working?
No. I was from '98 to 2002. That was 5 years. That was my last year, 2002. Yeah. I'd had enough of Staten Island.
And I don't know if I'm going to let Dan into these stories because they'll usually go to the Bahamas.
Okay.
Well, I have 2 more questions. First off, you talked about clamming off of Pecture, and I don't expect you to give me any details, but I'm going to say the west side of Pecture and the east side of Pecture are pretty much uncertified waters and probably have been for a while. So I'm assuming you're sort of more off of the south side of Pecture.
Yeah, you want to hear something pretty funny? I worked, Wednesday was my last, I worked 3 days this week. And when you get older, the heat kind of beats you up. And where I'm clamming, it took me about an hour and a half one day to find clams. And when I found them, it was really good there. But I've been there for a long time. So I'm working here, and it's on an edge that's really steep. And you have to be right on that edge. It goes from like 8 feet to 4 feet. And the way you set the rake up, it'll work in the 6.5, 5 feet, 6 feet. The 8 feet it won't work because the pole's not long enough, and the 4 feet it won't work because the pole's too long. So I'm working here, and at the end of the day, I'm getting ready to pack up, and here comes his boat, and I'm going, "Oh, what does this guy want?" He probably wants clams. So, which I had a few people stop and ask me for clams. Well, it turns out he's the harbor master for Islip Town, right? And he goes, "Can you clam here?" And I'm saying, "Wait a minute, you're supposed to know where I can clam and can." Well, I can clam there. There's a line that goes from the beach house, the Hector Street beach house, to one of the stanchions on the bridge. And it goes from there all the way west. So from that beach house east, it's not that long. It goes to the Nature Conservancy's property. You're allowed to clam there. You can also clam off that beach house, but you can't do it close to shore. You have to be out a ways. So I mean, I have all this paperwork from the DEC. I know where the lines are and that, but that was pretty funny. So to have, like I said, I learned to clam in Heckscher Park in East Islip 50-something years ago when I hadn't been back till this year. What was the other question?
The other question is, you have a unique perspective. I'd just like to hear your view about shellfish management on the Great South Bay 50 years ago to today.
Yeah, well, it's changed a lot. You know, they didn't have any limits or anything on the clams. And the thing back then was there were so many people clamming. And one of the things I didn't say, but what is true, it was so much competition. If you were working next to somebody and they were catching 3 bushels, you wanted to catch 4 bushels. They were catching 4, you wanted to catch 5. And everybody kind of knew everybody else. They knew the guys who would catch a lot of clams. We had some guys out there, we'd call them 6-pack diggers. They'd go out, make enough money for a couple 6-packs and go home. And we other guys that would work 8, 9, 10 hours. They'd rig it, you know. What I always kind of liked about it was you could do what you want. You were your own boss. If you wanted to work really hard, you couldn't. If you didn't want to work hard, all right, you didn't do it. Hindsight's 20/20. Perhaps if they had a management quota in that it might have lasted longer, the clamming. I think the biggest thing was the fact that the brown tide did away with all the little clams. So there was, once you caught something, there was nothing behind it to restock it. You know, that was the big thing. Now they have, Islip Town has a 2,000 clam limit, but nobody reaches that anymore. So, you know, like I say, hindsight is 20/20, but it was so different back then compared to the way it is now. You know, I can count, like I said, probably 2 hands. Where I'm clamming at Heckscher, as far as I can see, I can't see another boat. I'm going to say maybe 12, 13, 14 guys in Babylon, and there's guys in Bellport where they have a few clams too. But other than that, there's not many people out on the Great South Bay. I go out because I like to be out there. You know, I'll reach a point where I won't be able to do it anymore, but I haven't reached that yet.
Good.
I've heard anecdotally that there have been some multiple good sets of clams, sort of in the Babylon Islip area, meaning they're not just 1-year class, they're small, top necks, cherry stones, the whole range of sizes, which is
That's great. Yeah, that's a good thing. Where I'm clamming right here, I caught clams the size of my thumbnail to that big, and everything in between. And the bottom was alive. There were scallops there. There's this thing we call cockles. I call them a hairy clam. I hadn't seen them in years. There's plenty of them there.
Do you think the scallops are coming back?
Everything's hit or miss, you know. They might not. I mean, they weren't there in great numbers, but there were a couple scallops there.
It's beautiful. We actually saw a horseshoe crab eating 2 of them.
Yeah.
Right off the pier, and I haven't seen that in our river.
Well, that's what happens. Okay.
Steve, you want to go to shore clam?
Excuse me?
You want to clam in the sound?
Yeah, I went over there a couple times. That was funny too. You know, that's deep water, and they have a lot of clams over there. Sound. My friends were working in 50 or 60 feet of water. Believe it, the clam pole was 100 feet long, and they had clams out there. That was good. I just didn't want to go. That was kind of like working in Staten Island. You'd have to get up and do the tides, and you're going across Long Island and getting home with the traffic and everything. You know, I just stayed here because it was a lot easier for me. Yeah. Oh.
The natural predators of clams, besides that snail you were talking about, what else?
Conchs eat them.
Uh-huh.
Horseshoe crabs, they'll eat them. You know, they put their little foot in there and it'll pry them open. Like I said, moon snails a moon snail, they have a drill in it and they can drill a hole, like it looks like a drill. It's a perfectly round hole and suck the meat, you know, kill the clam, the muscle, and annihilate the meat like that. You wouldn't believe that snail is like that big, but I had those in a fish tank, and you see that, it comes out of it, wow. So, yep.
Back in the 1970s, there's a lot of controversy with the Conservation Department and the coal fault standard and closing areas for working the standards. What
Yeah.
were your thoughts back then as to what was happening with planning management?
Oh, God, that's a tough question. You know, they have there was always stuff going on with the coliform count, and I can tell you, no one ever got sick. So, you know, Clam Digger wants to clam here, they say that it's closed, and then they didn't have enough people to test the waters either, so they closed it down. It's hard to pinpoint that, you know. We were on one end and they were on the other end, so you try to get some kind of happy medium in between. Anybody? Oh.
Any other like marine life stories of things you've seen?
Well, just last week I saw an ocean sunfish that was about this big. That was about 30 feet from my boat. You could see the fins sticking up. And the next day I saw a skate that was about this big swim right over my boat. I never saw it, but years ago there was supposedly a whale in the bay, a beluga whale, I believe. I've seen, years ago there used to be so many fish in the bay. It's like, there was this one place over in by Davis Park, and I had a crab net with me, and I was catching this crab, and it was a big crab, and I looked up, and there must have been 10,000 weakfish or bluefish that jumped out of the water in front of me, just right at one. I said, "Oh my God, the place was alive." You see a lot of things like that. We used to catch seahorses in the rake. One time I actually, the tooth of the rake, I speared an angelfish, like a tropical angelfish like you see in the fish tanks. And the tooth went right through them, and I took him out and I put him in a bucket of water. I had a fish tank at home, but I took him in, and he lived. It didn't hit any organs or anything like that, but it was an angelfish. And then toadfish, we used to catch them all the time. I don't know if you know what a toadfish is. Yeah, like that. One of those bit me one time. You don't see it. It was hanging out in the coal rack, and it was a lot of lettuce in there. And all of a sudden, I feel this thing on my finger, and whoa! The thing went 30 feet in the air, and I looked at my finger was all bleeding. And this is also true. We actually one day we worked in Bayshore in the middle of the winter, and it was about 15 degrees out. And we cut a hole, and inside the hole was all this sea lettuce. Well, there were all these toadfish in the sea lettuce. So when we pulled the rake up and we emptied it out, we threw the toadfish in the lettuce on the side of the hole. Well, 20 minutes later, these toadfish were frozen solid. We actually used one as a hammock. And believe it or not, it was that cold, and we used the toadfish as a hammock. It changed the rate. Crazy things like that.
How about turtles? Have you had any turtles?
Yeah, turtles. Yeah, we had somebody left a white like bleach bottle buoy out there one year, and every day we'd get out and there'd be a turtle right next to that buoy. In Staten Island, the jellyfish came in, really, really thick. And these things had, 10, 12-foot tentacles. Well, sea turtles eat jellyfish. There must have been 50 or 60 sea turtles in it. And their heads would pop up. they'd be eating the jellyfish like crazy. All the ropers were getting stung. Another thing, I had every year here seals. You know, they'll pop up and snort, and you jump 10 feet. And then one day out there on the bay, a mile off the shore, I had a muskrat come up to my boat, trying to get in the boat. I don't know, I tried to catch him and take him on land, but I couldn't get him in the bucket of water. He swam around my boat for 15 minutes. And then I've had, believe it or not, I've had ducks land on my boat. When mating season, the mallards, the males chased the female, and the female landed on my boat to get away. So I was running all around the boat quacking. We had sparrows sometimes get lost in the fog and running around, and they'll land on the boat. I saw a mourning dove flying across the bay one day, going to Fire Island with a hawk about 20 feet behind him. Chased him the whole way, and just before he got to the Fire Island where he could hide in the trees, the hawks snatched him out of the air. You know. And another time I came in and I saw these seagulls, and they were attacking something, and I sailed over there, and they had a mourning dove that they knocked in the water, and they were about to eat them, so I flipped them out, and I took them actually to the vet here in Oakdale and gave him the bird. Stuff like that, it happens over the course of time. You know? Oh, those are a lot of crazy things that have happened over all the years. Oh. Yep.
Actually, my wife and I still dig our own clams, and we always chuckle when we hear people like yourself. You know, a lot of the bad ones, still the guys that are still out there calming, and we always get a chuckle out of the phrase "catch a clam," because
I know.
we know they're not very mobile. Care to comment?
That's pretty funny. When I first went clamming, these people owned a house in Bayport, and I remember going, I said, "Oh yeah, we're catching clams." And she said, "You're not catching clams, you're digging clams." But for us, we always say catching clams, because that's what we did for all those years. You know? Yep.
We saw last Sunday, there was some bad one, we were sailing, and we saw a baby shark.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We saw that fin, and we got closer and closer, so, oh my God.
Yeah, you never know what you're going to see, right? Yeah, I know a lot of stuff comes in and out of the inlet. Yeah. That's it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Okay.